This is Gavin Gaddis in for Ben Robbins on today, Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. In a nation of ad avoiders, one medium breaks through. Today, Sound Insights founder Ben Robbins returns for another look at the upcoming 2026 UK advertising landscape study. But before we get into that, one last call today, Wednesday, May 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sounds Profitable's Tom Webster and Brian Goldmark of Locked On will be debuting Trust and Attention, Why Sports Media Wins and How Brands Prove It in a live webinar. The report provides an expanded dive into the unique value of the sports podcast audience. You can grab your virtual seat now with a registration link in today's show notes. Time for the article, and as a reminder, I am in for Ben Robbins, so everything from here on out is from Ben himself. In a nation of ad avoiders, one medium breaks through. Nearly half of UK adults, 47%, cannot recall a single brand from advertising they've seen or heard in the past week. Not one. We're not talking about people who didn't see any ads. These are people who encountered plenty of advertising and retained nothing. In the same study for the same question, the figure for the US last year was 31%. The UK's advertising environment is measurably more resistant than America's, not anecdotally, measurably. Why Britain tunes out. This isn't simply a cultural quirk, it has structure. At the center of that structure sits an institution that has shaped British ears for nearly a century. The BBC, still one of the most used media platforms in the country, carries no commercial advertising. Never has. For generations of British listeners, the baseline expectation for quality audio has been a commercial-free one. The benchmark is silence where an ad would be. Any advertisement on any platform arrives against that backdrop. The effect runs deeper than simple preference. UK listeners have developed what might be called a BBC baseline, an unconscious standard against which all audio is measured. When an ad breaks the flow of a podcast, it isn't experienced merely as an interruption. It's experienced as a violation of what good audio is supposed to feel like. There's also a difference in how listeners relate to the host. In the United States, the podcast host has inherited something of a broadcaster archetype, a presenter, sometimes a pitchman, someone who has always been more comfortable moving between content and commerce. In the United Kingdom, the host is more often experienced as a companion, someone in your ear, not on your screen. When that companion pivots to sell you something, the stakes are different. The trust that was built in the content is now being deployed. And British listeners feel that ask is more acutely than their American counterparts. The result is a paradox that sits at the heart of this study. The UK's advertising environment is more resistant, yet the data reveals something that should make every UK media planner sit up. The 79% figure. Against that backdrop, the BBC baseline, the companion relationship, the habitual resistance, consider this. 79% of UK podcast listeners recall an ad they heard in the past week. That's remarkable on its own, and the base makes it more so. 43% of UK adults, nearly half the population, listen to podcasts monthly. At that scale, 79% recall is not a niche finding. It's a mass market result, delivered through a medium that the UK audience has every cultural reason to resist. The US study found similar strong recall for podcast listeners, but the UK result lands differently, because the baseline resistance here in the UK is higher. Podcasting isn't just performing well in the UK, it's performing well despite an audience that is structurally more skeptical of advertising than its American counterpart. The intimacy of the medium appears to carry the message through the friction. UK podcast advertising is not working because British listeners have dropped their guard. It's working because the format is strong enough to reach them anyway. Sounds Profitable's recent Audio Primes research captures why. A screen makes you a spectator. A voice makes you a friend. UK podcast advertising is working because the medium builds something advertising rarely earns, a genuine relationship between host and listener that carries the message through the resistance. The 18 to 34 crossover. Podcast ad recall among 18 to 34s, 86%. Broadcast TV recall among 18 to 34s, 83%. The medium that most UK media plans treat as a supplementary buy is outperforming broadcast television in attention for the exact audience advertisers most want to reach, effectively at parity with podcast edging ahead, almost certainly contrary to what most people in the room would have assumed before seeing this data. In the US, the two are essentially tied among younger audiences. In the UK, podcasts lead. The UK crossover has already happened. The planning assumptions just haven't caught up yet. Broadcast TV's 93% overall recall headline is real, but it is almost entirely a 55-plus story. Among over 55s, broadcast TV recall sits at 95%. Among 18 to 34s, it falls to 83%. The headline flatters, the age breakdown tells the truth. The gender story that every brand should care about. UK podcast ad recall, 79% male, 80% female. 1 percentage point, effectively identical. In a medium where almost everything else in advertising research shows a gender gap, where most platforms show men more likely to recall ads than women, or women more likely to in certain categories, podcasting simply doesn't have one. We saw this same pattern in the US data from the most recent advertising landscape study from Sounds Profitable. It's not a UK quirk. It is structural to the medium. For brands trying to reach women, and most brands are, this matters enormously. Podcasting is the one ad-supported medium where advertisers' attention is genuinely equal across gender. The reach is there, the recall is there, and the gap that distorts planning assumptions elsewhere simply isn't. What this means and what comes next. Recall tells you whether an ad was heard. It doesn't tell you whether it was believed. Those are different things, and the gap between them across every platform we tested is where the real planning intelligence lives. The full picture lands at the podcast show London on May 20th. Tom Webster and I are presenting the complete findings live on the Brandworks stage at 10 a.m. If you're there, come find us. About this study. The 2026 UK Advertising Landscape Study was commissioned by Sounds Profitable and conducted by Sound Insights. Fieldwork ran 6th through the 17th of February 2026 with 5,033 UK adults aged 18 plus weighted to census. The study covers 20 plus ad-supported media platforms across 4 dimensions: reach, attention, trust, and effectiveness, and replicates the Sounds Profitable US Advertising Landscape Study methodology for direct transatlantic comparison. Thanks for listening to Ben Robbins' article, In a Nation of Ad Avoiders, One Medium Breaks Through. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis, and we'll see you next week with another narrated article.